what's been on my mind to talk about is voice. Um, and you think that voice isn't something you have to think about with writing, but it is determinative in writing. It simply stands for your style. Um, and finding a voice is a really, it's probably one of the most difficult aspects of writing. Um, I mean, we talked about having ideas. We've talked about packaging ideas for a book. We've talked about, or an article, and editing and clarifying what one is thinking. And then really when it comes to sitting down and writing, I think the most important thing, and the thing that holds most people back, whether they know it or not, is the voice that they write in. And um, finding the voice, speaking consistently through that voice, which is what begins to make something um, artisan, artistic, gives it style, takes it beyond ordinary prosaic language, gives the writer what it is that people seek from writing, which is a way of being and expressing. And because you can deploy voice in a number of ways, in the narration, through characters, through the people who speak in your writing, writing really becomes a way of becoming. And I think it provides lots of opportunities. And you can explore perspectives, you can live through different perspectives. And really, it's a matter of style being far more than style. But voice is most expressed, I would say, the word most people would use would be tone. What's the tone you're taking in your writing? And it just all seems like one until you really start writing. And there's no other way to find a voice until you write and write and write and write lots of different things. And when you write different things, you discover that you're not taking the same tone in each of them. You take a different tone when you write a letter of condolence to someone than you do in writing about the election victory. You different purposes and goals summon different needs of expression, and tone is really something that you don't get to appreciate until you do a lot of writing in a lot of different formats. And there's no other way. Over the years, I mean, this is the thing. This is really the liberating part of writing. This is the thing I think that drives writers, the ability to take on different tones, to find different voices. And sometimes you find a voice that becomes incredibly comfortable to speak through. And I'm not even talking about fiction. I'm talking about nonfiction. Fiction is just off the charts in terms of being liberating and finding characters to speak through. But just even in my work as a journalist, I'm going to approach different articles different ways, with a different voice, with a different tone. And in any of my blog writing or book writing, it always takes a while to get the tone that's appropriate for whatever I am writing. And as I said before, I think it's really the biggest struggle. I just wonder whether it is for anybody else, or whether it's not something you've thought about before, or whether it you see it all as one until you do it a lot. I'm curious to know. Debbie, Kim, Mark, anybody? I'd love to hear.
Actually, I think I'm having a very difficult time with that.
Finding your voice.
So, yes. And I think the voice I want is different than what's natural for me, because what's natural is for me to come across scientific and factual, and I want the tone to be more compassionate and I don't know, providing hope. I know in my work, people think I'm very compassionate. I just don't see it coming across in any writing. But I'm new to the writing too, so I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll be really honest with you. There isn't a shortcut. There isn't a magic formula. You really just have to keep writing. And really, the only advice I could give you is that you're gonna, as you write, you want to go back and read what you've written, and you'll find you could be 3 chapters, 4 chapters into it, 5 chapters into it. I mean, authors talk about writing whole books without finding their voice, and then throwing it, finding that sentence, finding that paragraph, throwing everything else out and starting all over again. Because once you find it, it's very liberating and it opens you up. And just keep writing, whether or not you found the voice. Keep writing, keep trying to find it, and then go back over what you've written and take out those sentences, or highlight those sentences or those paragraphs where you feel you're getting close to the voice that represents the way you want to sound, and pull them together, even if they're from different parts, and go over them, and go over them. And every time you sit down to write, go over them. So you, and 20 times, so you get the rhythm, so you get the feeling, so you get the tone, and start your writing from there. This is something I do. I have been writing, the vast majority of my life. And this is something I do every time I write. You just have to go over it. It's like you're combing hair finally, and you're just going over it, working out all the knots, working out all the kinks, smoothing it, clarifying it, and getting on to that rhythm. It's going to have a rhythm. It's going to have a sound. It's going to have a tone. And you may not be able to articulate it, and you don't have to. You just have to get into it and duplicate it. And as you do that, you begin to note what helps you get into that. It might be reading something first. It might be reading a poem. It might be reading a news story. Whatever the kind of tone you want to take, it can really help to read something that has that kind of a voice that's closer to the voice that you want to have. But I'm not going to pretend. There are no shortcuts, and it really takes a while to find voice. And I'll tell you, some days you can write and not get into the voice you want to get into. And I wouldn't throw away what I write, but I would go over it because it can stimulate it. It just may be a tone, it may be a change of rhythm of sentences, it may be adding something, or for me, usually it's taking away. Um,
Yeah,
but go ahead.
Dwayne and I were actually talking about this last night.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
this is a challenge I've had a little of.
Uh-huh.
Now, for me, finding my voice was easy in the sense that because I've been teaching this for decades, I had all this practice. Every time I do a talk, I would look back and what felt natural, what didn't, where did I just seem to not be as clear, what seemed to resonate with my audience. And so that gave me a lot of practice. And certainly for writers who have the opportunity to do a talk, and by talk, I don't mean necessarily in front of 1,000 people. It could just be talking one-on-one with someone or to a
Yeah.
couple of friends, but that helps you basically practice.
Yes, it's really practice. And this is something that's come up before in other contexts, but it's practicing, and by practicing, finding those elements within you, without you, that give you access to the voice you want for the task that you're on. And I mean, it's going to change. It's going to change depending on your baseline for that day or that part of your life or whatever. But it's really, I think that voice is really what holds people up the most in writing. That's been my experience. And it comes as a complete surprise to a lot of people, um, that they have to find a voice, that you don't just sit down and somehow open a vein and it pours out of you, or that there's some magic moment when your brain just opens up. You have to really work at finding your own voice. I could get into all the variations of kinds of voices there are, and you know, the narrator's voice, the character's voice, but really, I'm making the assumption here that most of us are dealing with nonfiction, and still you need to find a voice, and it's a different tone for just about um, everything that you do. Um, or and sometimes I appreciate what you said, Mark, because you're you've been in front of a class, um, daily, weekly, whatever, at some with some periodicity. And when you plan what you're going to say, um, you have to find that voice for how to speak to however big or large your audience is, and get back to it time after time. So, as I said, you may not be able to articulate it, how you do it, or what that voice is, but you've probably had experience accessing it. And that's really important. And it
No,
just, there's
I
just no formula for getting to it except doing it and doing it and doing it.
So one thing I wonder, so when I was doing my writing, I literally sat at my keyboard and just visualized my class in front of me. Right. So
Yeah.
imagine, okay, here they are. What would I say? And it just came out through my typing. Some people like to literally record. I prefer to type. One thing that's kind of struck with me, I've been reading a great book called Range. And Range it was a New York Times bestseller. The writer follows something of a Gladwell style, where each chapter has a narrative to it. And there's this
Uh-huh.
great story, and it pulls you in. So I just read a chapter is on creative development at Nintendo. And it begins, the opening is something like, in the fall of 1889, a small shop owner in Japan hung out a sign saying whatever. Right, this saying like Nintendo. This obviously had nothing to do with the content, but set the scene. Now
Right.
that's something I'm terrible at, because I come at from a professorial approach of, okay, let's get into this. And I think I can make up for it because of how I engage my audience. That's my nature and style. It works well in an interactive setting. I've wondered, will it translate as well in a written setting? So that's the one drawback to the method I used. But something I'm going to try, because I wish I could write in this style that this author does, or Gladwell or others, which is obviously very.
So I have one bit of infallible advice for you, and that is read it about 5 times and then put it away and sit down and imitate it.
So that's.
Reading it 5 times is like letting that rhythm flow through you. You're going to, each time you're going to pick up some nuances of the rhythm and the style, and then you're going to put it away and you're going to make your own stab at it, which is going to be an imitation that will blend what you've read and what you like with where you are, and you'll see how that comes out, whether you like that, whether you need to move closer to the style, or whether you're finding some unique voice of your own through that imitation. Something is speaking to you in that writing that is resonating. It's resonating with you, and it may really open up something in you that makes it easier to write, or that allows you to say some things that you want to say. And the other thing I recommend, you're very fortunate you have your students to think of. But one piece of advice that I think is helpful for a lot of people is to choose someone that you want to talk to, whether it's an old teacher, whether it's an ex-partner, whether it's a child, whether it's your neighbor, whether it's someone you've yet to meet. What are the things that you want to say, in what tone? How do you want to be? How do you want to sound? That's why I say that writing is really a pure form of possibility, because you have so many opportunities over and over again with different writing goals to find different voices. It's not easy to find different voices when you're first starting out. Finding your own good writing voice for the task at hand is challenging enough. But when you get into it and you get a little fluent with how you could find voices, I really do recommend visualizing a person that you're talking to, and you're talking to them in the place and in the way that you want them to hear you. It's still going to be challenging. People underestimate how the difficulties of expressing exactly what's on their mind, articulating exactly what's on your mind and the way that you feel about it. So articulating your experience of it and your feelings about it without putting declarative sentences of this is how I feel about it, but expressing that through your tone and your rhythm. Boy, it's tough, and it takes a lot of practice to do it. And there's no endpoint. We're all always doing it all the time. And that's part of the fun of writing, I have to say, is having those new challenges and finding that you're writing something new and you're taking a tone that you haven't taken before, and just, hey, can I carry this out for 5 paragraphs? Can I carry this out for a blog post? Can can I get something out of this? I'm putting something into it. Can I get something out of it? Is it working for what I have to say? Will it work for more of what I might want to say in the future?
So this leads to the question I wanted to ask. There's an acting technique in which two people doing a scene, or could be more than two people, will do the scene multiple ways. They might do it completely devoid of emotion. They might do it overly dramatic. They might do it comedically. They might do it seriously. And they'll do the same scene, no matter what the scene's supposed to be. They'll do it in all these different styles to kind of get that range and then figure out where to alter a line to do, because in their case, the words are always the same. And it's just where they're putting their tone and emphasis and kind of punch up the scene. So I was thinking with writing is similar to your idea of, okay, let me try writing like Gladwell. Let me try writing like Hemingway. Let me try this.
Absolutely.
But now, if the catch is when you do that, when actors do the scene, the words are always the same. Here, if I'm going to do different styles, right, it's going to be a Hemingway versus I'm trying to remember the English author, Tale of Two Cities. Very lots of words, right? Very
Right.
and so these styles might clash. And so do you have suggestions if I try doing all these different, pick 3 or 4 styles and try doing a few things a different way, how do I think about merging that and combining them in a cohesive way?
Why? Why do you want to? I mean, I just think that, I mean, you're enunciating like the perfect exercise, which is to read, 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 and then imitate, imitate, imitate. And there's no finer way to master finding a voice than being able to duplicate someone else's voice. Usually, there are a couple of writers who never get beyond that, but but um, but usually you get something out of that exercise. It means there's some meta understanding going on. If I could put myself into Charles Dickens and sound like Charles Dickens, if I can put myself into Robert Frost, if I could put myself into Jane Austen, and Tolstoy, come out with these interesting voices, it means I have learned something. I may not be able to say what it is, but I've learned something about how to put words together, and they can be all about different things. I don't know. I mean, actors have the simplicity of the lines being known, but they have the added challenge of whatever they do has to work for 2 people. So you're only doing what works for you. I'm only finding what works for me on the assumption that what works for me is going to convey everything I want to convey, and other people will get the message. So I mean, that I have no other advice than to write a lot, to read, 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 and imitate, 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 and play around yourself. And then, try and do it in those different styles. Um, and and in the conversation Kim and I were having before, I suggested that whatever that style is, it may help to read something before she sits down at the computer to write. It may help to sit down and read something, whether it's a poem in the style that has some resonance with what you want to say, or some part of a book, a paragraph or a chapter, or any length, or even a news story. I mean, sometimes you really want to, blare and blurt things out. I mean, there's so many different styles to explore and exploit in the very good way. Um, that reading and writing are the only two ways to get there. And I mean, Mark, if you have the time to play that way, I think only good things can come from playing that way. And if you were a student in a writing program, um, I'll I'll take it back one step. If you're a student in a university, in a writing program, not necessarily talking about a master's of fine arts, but if you're doing undergraduate work, among the core assignments you're going to get is you're going to be asked to read, and you're going to be asked to imitate. And it's just great. I mean, there's no other way to come to understand what goes into expressing something. And that's the sum of my advice. We can end the call now. I mean, that's it. You know all my secrets. I mean, there are lots of other aspects to it, and we can talk about varieties of doing it and ways you like to do it. But honestly, it's just reading and writing and playing around and imitating, and instead of imitating, I mean, Kim has an actual project she's working on, and she doesn't need to imitate. She needs to do the reading part of it, and then take from that, let it ring in her ears as she sits down and write, and refresh oneself whenever the inner well runs dry. Whenever you forget what it is, you go back and you refresh yourself. And by the way, that's how I live my life. I mean, I've been doing this for decades and decades, but I do that too. And every other writer does that too. And as a journalist, I have to read fiction because every so often, because I have to get reacquainted with my well will run dry of ways to sort of experiment and play with tone in different pieces. And I want to go back to the well and get something new, and let that infuse my stylistic buffet and of choices that I would have in writing. And I have to do that. And I'm making the assumption that every other writer does that too. And there are lots of, so what are the elements that are going to go into the voice that you have? So the elements that are going to go into it are, well, the words themselves. Do you like them simple? Do you like them adorned? Do you like them sort of laden with adjectives? Or, like me most of the time, do you like them with powerful, sharp, incisive verbs and very few adjectives? One of the things I like to do, I mean, this is my own preference. Punctuation is going to be another element of your style. Are you going to talk in short, crisp, staccato bursts? Are you going to have a soft and flowing tone? Are the words going to be mellifluous to help you convey that tone? Words with no hard edges, and where the sounds play off each other and play along and roll into each other. there's no right and wrong here. It really depends on what your goal is, and also how you want that person to feel, that person in your head that you're talking to. So it's going to be your choice of words, it's going to be the punctuation, it's going to be your preference or not for adjectives, which words you want to do the heavy lifting of conveying what you have to say. I'm a verb partisan. I already told you that. When I write, I like a voice that speaks with restraint. I don't like to tell my readers how to feel. I like to leave spaces to let my readers put their own emotions into something. I find that's far more powerful for me. And when someone is having their own emotional experience and not the experience that I dictate, when they can sum up their own images of similar kinds of feelings that I'm hinting at, and they become much more bound to whatever it is that I'm writing, and appreciate it more. It has more meaning for them, because it helps them elaborate themselves to themselves. So it becomes much more important to them. As I said, I don't like smearing emotion on a page, but I sure do love the power of emotion and letting it speak in between the spaces of the words. So the rhythm of the words, the rhythm of the sentences, the punctuation, the words you choose, all of these are going to influence the voice that you have. Has Mark, you succeeded in finding a voice that you want by doing a lot of speaking, which in a way is a form of writing. It's using the language. It's using language to express your thoughts. A similar thing.
The one challenge I remember my editor mentioned to me is that writing tends to be a little more formal than public speaking, and so that was an adjustment I had to make.
Just for Hunter Thompson.
Yes. So I think for my next book, I'll go through and I'll do a first pass in my natural voice. But before I go to the editor, I know in addition to the normal editing of just improving things, I need to do a pass of be a little more formal in the approach.
Yeah, formality is something that's very easy to add in an edit. Loosening up, on the other hand, loosening up can be done too in an edit. And I find that I am, as an editor at Psychology Today, I do a lot of both. For people who write very, very stiffly, who are so used to the academic format, I will very often loosen up the language. It isn't just loosening up the language, it's really loosening up the way you introduce information as well. But there are many times where I'm doing the opposite. I'm for other people where I'm tightening things up, and I don't want to say formalizing, but I guess formalizing is part of it. But giving it more structure than conversation. Boy, there are really times when you want a conversational tone. And when you do, it is so helpful to have that person that you're writing to in your head and imagine a place, a setting, the ideal setting where you want to be speaking, Are you sitting on rocks on a beach somewhere, big boulders, and looking out at the sea and talking and letting your mind expand? Are you sitting face to face in a cafe? Are you sitting on easy chairs in a living room and talking? Are you going about your business in the kitchen and having a conversation while peeling potatoes? I mean, there are just a lot of different ways to imagine a conversation happening. And hopefully, the way that you imagine it happening has something to do with what you want to express and how you feel, and almost the setting you imagine saying the things that you want to say, so that you're you're constructing your own virtual reality to help you get out what you want to say. And notice I said help you, because it's going to take a few passes under the best of circumstances. And that's why we said before, writing is editing and editing is writing. You always have to perfect it and comb it and keep chipping away at it to get it exactly right. Debbie, do you ever find it difficult getting into a voice or
All the time. Absolutely. Pretty much every time I write.
Yeah.
It isn't like it's easy. And I wouldn't say that that writing comes easily to me. Voice is tricky. When I'm writing about a certain topic, I might want a tone that is different from another piece that I might want to write. The same way I have a conversation, depending on who I'm speaking with. And so that can be really hard for me, because I find that when I want to convey a certain tone or a certain message or make my voice a certain way, I have to make sure that I'm actually conveying what I think I'm conveying. That's not easy.
No, it's not. And I don't want to tell you how many times I've been working at something, trying to find the right voice. And, I'm writing something and stuff comes out and I'm pretty far into it. And then I wake up at 3:00 in the morning and that voice is somehow just on the edge of my brain. And I'll just dash into, my space and sit down at my computer and write from that voice. And then once I have it down on paper, that becomes my template. And I keep going back there and I'll read it over and over and over again. If in that burst, I can't get out all that I want to get out, when I pick it up the next time, I can't pick it up without going over and over and over that paragraph, page, whatever, to get back into that stream. And that's how I think about it. It's like there are lots of different streams and I'm jumping into this stream and I have to get wet. I have to immerse myself in it to go with its flow. And I have to do it every time. Every single time I do that. And when you're writing a book, you just have to keep doing it over and over. And but the good thing about writing a book is you just have so much more behind you that you can read to get you into the flow. I'm thinking about my last book, and there were different tones, different voices in a way in some different chapters. They were variations, and each time I had to go back and every time I sat down to write, no matter where I was in the chapter, I would start from the beginning of that chapter and read it, if I had to read it 5 times, until that rhythm was in me and I could then carry it forward. And that's what you have to do. Um, uh, and, and it's hard, uh, that voice. Um, and if you really want to have fun, try writing fiction with a couple of different characters with different voices. I mean, that's a high wire act, seriously. But if you really, really, really want to have fun, that's a fun way to do it. And I never thought of myself as a fiction writer, but when you do a lot of interviewing and you get a chance to report the words of people, not just in one sentence bites, but sometimes I'll get to write really long captions for people in their own words, a 500-word caption. I love it because it's almost practice for writing a fiction. You've got, I'll interview someone, I'll have a transcript. So I enjoy kind of figuring out what their style is and editing so that I'll have 500 important revealing words in their style. They won't even know, hopefully by the time they read it, even though 10,000 words will have been boiled down to 500 words, they won't even feel that it's been edited. That's something that can be done. But for me, the beauty of that is that when I do it with different people, I get to really apprehend the difference in style. And then that becomes a way of recognizing how fiction writers do it, how they get different characters, how experience moves differently through people. Oh, I see that wonderful dog. And that's fun. And it, I mean, it's, it's like taking writing 401. It's really experimenting to play with different characters and different voices. But it's all part of the same challenge that we're talking about here. It's really no different from finding even that simple voice and tone of narration for whatever the simple task is that you're doing. I mean, I love when I find that moment when I can't tell you how many articles I write where it takes me days, a week to do the opening paragraph. And then it could take me 2 days to write 5,000 more words. I mean, that's the challenge of finding the voice. Once I find the voice, I may be exaggerating slightly. It'll take me more than 2 days if it's a highly researched and reported article on a challenging topic. But finding that voice appropriate for that piece of work is the challenging part. And I mean, there are other challenges with reporting the rest, but finding that voice is the hard part. It takes, without a doubt, the lion's share of the work that goes into an article. So whenever anybody asks me how far I am on an article, I never tell them, because it would scare the shit out of them if I said, well, I'm still on the first paragraph, after a week. And, they'd be a little scared. But it's not a proportional amount of time. It takes much more time to find the voice and the tone that's going to open the door to the rest of the piece. and all the other information and expression can walk through that door. So, and as I said, I go back to other writers and get inspiration, or sometimes I'm not even actively looking for inspiration, but I'll read something and I'll just feel, oh wow, yeah, this is close to what I want to do. And with that fresh on my mind, I will race to my computer and maybe start writing some. And I may eventually tighten it up, loosen it up, throw it out, but it's pulling me along in some way further to my goal.
Do you have any advice for, we live in a world where you get an email out in 3 seconds, you need to get an idea across in a, just a very few amount of words if you're making a post on Twitter or in another place. How do you dial it into a whole different direction and get yourself so that your voice moves from just being, sort of informational to having a voice with a story to it?
It's a great question. I don't know that I have an answer to it, but that's one thing I do love about email, that it every day presents me with the opportunity, usually, to respond in an array of different voices. Here's the thing, I may not respond immediately to something that I know is going to take a voice that's, I have to dig a little deeper to find, or that's one I want to put a little bit more attention to, or I want to find it, or I want to use it, or I want to play with it. And sometimes I don't know. Sometimes when I sit down and write an email, it's like with anything else I write. I don't know that I might start typing and all of a sudden it opens something up in me. I mean, I know who the people are that I can, be more of myself with, and I may open up a topic that just allows me to find a voice or to express something that's been on my mind for a while. I mean, most of my email is not like that. I'm sure most of anybody's is not like that. But there are the staccato sentences that don't even, I'm not even in the sentences. Did this yesterday, aiming today for, and that's it. There are those, and then there are others where, push them aside. Sometimes, unfortunately, I'll push them aside and they'll get buried in my inbox and I never get to them when I want to. But it's really nice to see email is giving you that opportunity. And maybe there are some that you should put aside and say, hey, every day at 3:00 or every day at 5:00, these are the ones I'm going to let my hair down with. I don't know exactly how, but I'm going to use them as portals. And you may not, but you may be able to, find a piece of gold that in which you say something in a way that you like. I have to tell you very honestly, and I make no bones about it, I harvest my emails. If I know that I've written an email, especially if I'm in the midst of writing an article, and there were just so many things going through my mind. I'm researching, I'm writing, I'm expressing, I'm trying to find ways to master a topic because I don't write about things that I already know. I like writing about things I don't already know about. Otherwise, I'd bore myself to death. And so in my emails, something that I'm thinking about may find expression in an email that I really like, or the way something is expressed is really something that I want to import into whatever other writing is going on. And I mean, as a writer, I use everything by every means I know it and every means I do it. And so I will, if I know I've sent an email that has some special resonance for me, I'll flag it. And, or I may even on the spot copy a paragraph or a part of it and just stick it at the bottom of whatever document I'm writing so that it's there for me to refer to. And I may not use it. It may just have a rhythm for some, or it may have just an expression that I want to take out. I like the wording of something. I like the rhythm of something. And I'll take that and I'll use it, but I will have it there to refer to. So I'll do that. So I harvest my emails, and what that means is that an email becomes an opportunity for writing. And I think and even business emails, I have to say, even conversations with strangers or in a strictly business format, sometimes you just have that expression that comes out the right way, or something you say is something you like and you're happy with something about it, whether it's the word choice or the rhythm, or you mastered a thought that's been nagging at you. And I harvest that and use it in moving forward with the other things. And I recommend it. I mean, it's not illegal. No one's going to arrest you for it. It's your own words, and you're pushing yourself forward in your thinking. And it helps find that voice. So that voice can come out anytime. You never know. I mean, we're all such jumbles of thought and activity. And I've said it many times before, creativity is really harvesting a lot of what goes through your brain, the ideas, without censoring them. And finding a voice very often can be a matter of not censoring yourself and going back and lifting something that you've already said and using it and furthering that and using that as your example to replicate in other ways. By the way, that replication, that finding that phrase, that distinctive way, that phrase, that putting together of thoughts that you like, you will usually find that you develop a distinctive way of doing that. And that distinctive way of putting words together is style with a big S. That's the writer's style. And of course, voice reflects style. The voice is one of the elements of style. So that distinctive way of putting thoughts together and phrasing and rhythm, it's usually so distinctive for writers that books can be articles in books that have been written anonymously. If they've been written by a writer who's pretty well published and has a body of work out there, can be analyzed by artificial intelligence and the writer identified. that was how Primary Colors, Joe Klein was identified as the author of Primary Colors. Writers have a distinctive style of putting things together. So nothing you write is off limits. It's all there. It's, you know, you can use any of it and all of it to deploy your style. And just because email is used for mundane tasks doesn't mean it's limited to mundane thinking or expressing. So I'm always harvesting mine.
Thank you so much for today, Hara. This was great. I actually really learned a lot about voice today.
Good. And now I hope to see some expression of that. And I myself have been struggling this morning with finding a very right voice for something that I'm gonna write today. It's I'm here in Los Angeles, and the silver lining to my being a displaced person is that I'm living in the apartment over the garage in the main house of my son, daughter-in-law, and their 2 kids. And one of them is 13 today. And it's like, this is the silver lining of my of my displacement, is that I get to spend it with my grandkids. And it's a birthday today. And I'm just trying to find the right words and the right tone. And just before we started, what I do? Look at, I wrote it on a little sticky pad. It kind of, you could see I crossed out, and I kind of got to it, you know, on the second sticky, and that'll be, you know, find some pretty paper, and I'll write the note to my grandson. But it takes a while on every little thing, to emails, birthday cards, whatever, to find that voice. So happy voice finding, everybody. And I hope to see examples of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Hara.
Ciao.